The sun beat down on the tarmac at Sangster International Airport as the newlyweds stepped off the plane, hand in hand, looking every bit like a picture-perfect couple. Simone Robinson, radiant in a flowing white sundress, smiled at her husband as though nothing else in the world existed. Dwayne, dressed in crisp linen and aviator shades, pulled their luggage behind them with a confident grin. They were in love, or at least that's what everyone thought. And this honeymoon, a week-long escape to the shores of Negril, was supposed to be the beginning of forever. To the strangers who passed them in the airport terminal, they were just another young couple basking in marital bliss. No one could have guessed what would unfold only days later. Simone had always dreamed of this moment. A romantic island honeymoon, ocean breezes, barefoot dinners on the beach. Everything about this trip had been meticulously planned. The couple had spared no expense. 5-star resort, ocean view suite, champagne on arrival, spa treatments, sunset cruises. A love story in paradise. What no one knew, not Simone's family, not the hotel staff, not even Dwayne's closest friends, was that beneath the surface of this picture-perfect marriage was a truth so dark, it would ignite a storm neither of them saw coming. Back in Kingston, just days earlier, they had exchanged vows beneath a canopy of orchids in a lavish garden ceremony. Over 200 guests watched as Dwayne promised to love, cherish, and protect Simone. He wiped tears from her cheeks during the ceremony. He kissed her knuckles gently when she trembled at the altar. He looked like the man of every woman's fantasy. But Dwayne Robinson was living a lie. Even as the priest blessed their union, he was keeping a secret, one that burned in his chest like acid. He had debated telling her. He almost did more than once. But each time he looked into Simone's trusting eyes, he convinced himself silence was safer, that some truths are better buried. They checked into the Seastar Cliff Hotel, a secluded oceanfront resort perched above dramatic limestone cliffs and surrounded by lush palms. It was quiet, romantic, and far from the crowded tourist zones. Simone loved it instantly. The staff welcomed them with fruit-infused water and cold towels. The concierge handed them an envelope marked, Mr. and Mrs. Robinson Honeymoon Package. Inside were vouchers for champagne dinners, couples massages, and a private boat tour along the coast. Their room overlooked the Caribbean Sea. Simone squealed in delight when she saw the white canopy bed decorated with rose petals. "Dwayne," she whispered, wrapping her arms around his neck. "We made it." But Dwayne stood stiff in her embrace. His smile faltered, only for a moment. Then he kissed her on the forehead and whispered, "Yeah, baby, we made it." That night they dined under the stars. Lobster tails, grilled plantains, and sweet rum cocktails. A band played soft reggae while couples danced barefoot on the sand. Dwayne was quiet, reflective. Simone chalked it up to exhaustion, the wedding stress, the flight, the long week. She didn't press. She didn't know that the man sitting across from her, her new husband, was fighting demons he had hoped would stay behind in Kingston. As they walked back to the room, Dwayne stopped suddenly. He stared out at the dark waves crashing against the cliff below. "Simone," he said, almost in a whisper, "have you ever done something you thought you'd take to your grave, but then suddenly, it starts eating at you?" She laughed softly, thinking he was being dramatic. "Like what? You forgot to pack my charger again." He forced a smile. "Yeah, something like that." They made love that night, but something had shifted. Dwayne didn't hold her afterward like he usually did. He stared at the ceiling, lost in thought, while Simone drifted into a peaceful sleep, dreaming of the life they would build together. Outside, the sea howled, and the moon cast pale silver light across the cliffs. The paradise Simone had dreamed of had arrived. But so had the beginning of her nightmare, because Dwayne had already decided. Before this honeymoon ended, he would tell her everything, even if it meant losing her forever. Back in Kingston, before the whirlwind wedding, before the perfectly filtered Instagram reels and carefully selected hashtags, Simone Harris had always believed she truly knew the man she was marrying. Dwayne Robinson was smart, smooth, funny, ambitious. He had that easy charm that made strangers trust him and women fall hard. To Simone, He was the one man who made her believe in forever. But there's one rule in life that love always forgets. You never really know someone until they have nothing left to hide. Simone and Dwayne's love story had started like most modern romances, at a university event in Kingston. She was a second-year literature major, soft-spoken, observant, raised by a single mother who taught her never to beg for a man's love. Dwayne was a final-year business student, the kind who turned heads without trying, always surrounded by friends, laughter, and confidence. For Simone, he was like gravity, silent, powerful, impossible to ignore. She never chased, but Dwayne chased her. They dated for 6 years, through job changes, relocations, family drama, and heartbreaks. When Simone's father died of a stroke, Dwayne was the one who held her up. He had a way of making her feel like she was the only woman in a crowded room. Over time, Dwayne became family. Her mother adored him. Her younger brother looked up to him. Her cousin Keisha, well, Keisha was complicated. Keisha had always been bold, wild, the kind of woman who said what she thought and did what she pleased. She was beautiful in a dangerous way. Simone never worried about her, though. Keisha dated rappers, DJs, even a married politician once. Simone figured Dwayne wasn't her type. She figured wrong. The night before the wedding, while Simone was at her bridal suite being pampered with wine, makeup, and last-minute nerves, Dwayne was at his bachelor party. Tame, upscale affair planned by his best friend at a private villa in the hills. No strippers, no wild drinking, no drama. At least that's what he told her. What he didn't tell her was that Keisha showed up at the villa. Drunk, dressed in red, alone. He didn't tell her that she whispered things in his ear. Things he used to wish Simone would say. That she pulled him into a dark room. That they kissed. That it didn't stop there. He didn't tell her he woke up in a cold sweat the next morning, sick to his stomach. That he stared at his reflection and saw a man who didn't deserve to wear that ring. That he almost called off the wedding. Almost. But the guests were arriving. Simone's mother was beaming. The venue was paid in full. The musicians were rehearsing. Everything was in motion. He kept quiet. They said their vows at dusk. Simone glowed. Dwayne smiled. No one noticed the flicker of guilt in his eyes as he said, "Till death do us part." And now, 5 days into the honeymoon, that guilt was starting to crack through the surface. Every time Simone touched him, kissed him, smiled like a woman who felt safe, Dwayne felt like a fraud. At first, he told himself he'd take it to the grave. That one mistake couldn't destroy everything they'd built. But secrets have weight. And Dwayne's secret had grown heavier with each sunset, each kiss, each silent moment he watched Simone sleep beside him. On the 4th night, he stared at her from across their dinner table. Candlelight flickered between them. Simone was telling a funny story about her college days, laughing with that full-body joy he used to love. But Dwayne wasn't listening. His mind was somewhere else. "You okay?" she asked, catching his stare. He nodded. "Yeah. Just thinking about how lucky I am." She reached out and squeezed his hand. "Me too." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Later that night, after they made love, Dwayne stood by the window of their cliffside suite. The ocean wind pushed through the curtains. The sky was dark. The guilt screamed louder than the waves. He lit a cigarette. The one Simone didn't know he still kept hidden in the lining of his bag, and stared at the sea. He thought of Keisha, of how her hands had felt, of how she smirked as he left that room, whispering, "Your little princess will never know." He thought of Simone, how she'd saved every love note, how she cried during their first dance, how she always believed in him more than he believed in himself. And for the first time since that night, he made a decision. Tomorrow he would tell her. He would confess everything. He had no idea that confession would be the last thing he ever said. The morning sun spilled over the horizon like molten gold, painting the Caribbean Sea in soft shades of orange and pink. Negril was waking up, slowly and beautifully. Fishermen pulled in their nets. Hotel staff swept the poolside deck. And high above the cliffs, in the resort's most private suite, Simone and Dwayne Robinson were just beginning their 5th day as husband and wife. Simone awoke to the scent of the sea and the rhythmic crashing of waves below. She turned in bed, expecting to find Dwayne beside her. But he was gone. His side of the bed was cold. She stepped onto the terrace, shielding her eyes from the sun, and spotted him standing near the edge of the cliff, motionless, staring out at the horizon. He'd been up all night. She approached quietly, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden deck. "You're up early," she said softly, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. Dwayne flinched, not from fear, but from guilt. "I couldn't sleep," he replied. "Too much on my mind." Simone leaned her head against his back. "You've been distant lately," he sighed. "I know. Talk to me, Dwayne. What's going on?" Silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind and waves. And then he turned. His eyes were darker than usual, not with anger, but with shame. And beneath that shame was something else. Desperation. "I need to tell you something," he said. Simone raised her eyebrows, half joking. "You're not secretly married, are you?" He didn't smile. Her heart skipped. "Dwayne," she said, suddenly serious. He walked past her, back into the suite, grabbing a chair and sitting at the edge of the bed like a man about to walk into his own execution. "Do you remember the night before the wedding?" he began. "Of course," she said. "I was with my girls. You were with the boys. Why?" Dwayne inhaled deeply, as if trying to suck the oxygen out of the room. Then, slowly, with eyes locked on the floor, he said it. "I slept with someone that night." The words sliced through the air like glass. Simone didn't move, didn't breathe. She felt like her entire body had gone underwater. "What did you just say?" "I didn't mean to," he said quickly, as if that made it better. "It was stupid. I was drunk. I was nervous and I panicked. I didn't know if I was ready to get married. And I messed up." Simone took a step back. Her legs felt weak. "Who?" she asked, voice cold. Dwayne hesitated, then whispered, "Keisha." Silence. He might as well have said he murdered her mother. Simone's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Just a small, trembling breath. The kind that only comes when your heart breaks so violently, it doesn't make a sound. Keisha. Her cousin. Her best friend growing up. The woman she trusted to help her choose her wedding dress. The woman who toasted to their eternal love at the reception. The woman who cried during their first dance. "I'm sorry, Simone," Dwayne said. "I wanted to tell you before the wedding, but everything was already planned. And you were so happy. I didn't want to destroy it all." "You didn't want to destroy yourself," she snapped. Dwayne stood. "I love you. It meant nothing. It was a mistake. A stupid one time. Don't you dare reduce this to a mistake." Simone interrupted, her voice shaking. "You slept with my blood, Dwayne. On the night before we vowed to be loyal to each other. That's not a mistake. That's betrayal at the deepest level." Tears welled in her eyes but refused to fall. Simone wasn't a woman who cried easily, not even now. Dwayne stepped toward her, but she backed away. "Simone, don't," she said. "Don't touch me." She walked past him, picked up her phone, and walked out the door. She needed air, space, anything but the man in that room. She walked the resort grounds aimlessly, ignoring the cheerful greetings from staff and the sound of reggae music in the distance. Her mind was racing. She felt trapped, like she was watching her marriage rot in real time. By the time she returned to the suite 2 hours later, she was eerily calm. Dwayne was sitting on the balcony, head in hands. When he saw her, he stood up. "I want to fix this," he said. "Whatever it takes. You can't fix what's broken beyond repair." She walked past him, poured herself a glass of wine, and sat down in the armchair near the window. She stared out at the sea, and for the first time in her life, she felt nothing. No sadness, no love, no hope, only a quiet, growing storm. And in that moment, Simone made a decision. She wouldn't cry. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't leave. She would watch him, wait, and before this honeymoon ended, she would make sure Dwayne Robinson paid for what he did in full. Simone Robinson was raised to believe in self-control. Her mother, a stern but elegant woman, taught her that composure was power, that no matter how deeply someone cuts you, you never bleed in front of them. Let them guess how bad they hurt you, she used to say. Silence is a woman's sharpest weapon. So Simone didn't scream. She didn't slap Dwayne. She didn't throw her wineglass across the room, even though every nerve in her body begged her to. Instead, she smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. The kind that should scare any man with half a brain. And for the next 24 hours, Simone played the role of the perfect wife. She told Dwayne she forgave him. She kissed him softly that night, held his hand on their sunset cruise, laughed politely when the tour guide cracked jokes. To anyone watching, they were the dream couple again, newlyweds glowing with love. But underneath Simone's skin, something had changed. She was no longer grieving the loss of her marriage. She was planning her revenge. That night, when Dwayne fell asleep beside her, snoring softly and muttering her name in his dreams, Simone lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above them. Her mind wasn't on love anymore. It was on how to kill a man and get away with it. She grabbed her phone and stepped out onto the balcony. The Wi-Fi signal was weak, but strong enough. She opened her browser and typed, "How to make a drowning look accidental. Poison that dissolves in alcohol. Best time for cliff diving in Negril. How long does it take for someone to die from a fall?" She deleted her search history each time. She wasn't reckless. Simone had always been the smart one in the family, the one who solved problems quietly with surgical precision. Now the problem was Dwayne, and the solution was becoming clearer by the hour. The cliffs of Negril were beautiful, towering, deadly. Tourists loved to jump from them, heart-racing dives into the turquoise depths. But accidents happened. Slips, missteps. One wrong move and you vanish into the rocks below. Perfect cover for a perfect crime. The next morning, she woke up early, showered, and dressed in a bright yellow bikini. The one Dwayne had said made her look like a goddess. She told him she wanted to do something spontaneous, something daring. "Let's go cliff diving," she said, her voice sugary sweet. Dwayne blinked. You're terrified of heights." "Maybe I'm not the same woman you married," she replied, slipping on her sandals. He laughed nervously. "Are we okay?" "We will be," she said, brushing her fingers across his cheek. The resort offered complimentary rides to Rick's Cafe, the most famous cliff diving spot in Negril. The driver, a cheerful Rastafarian named Miguel, played reggae hits as they drove along the coast. Dwayne held her hand. Simone leaned on his shoulder. They arrived just before sunset. The crowds were thick, the drink strong, the music loud. Simone smiled, posed for photos, waved at strangers. Dwayne couldn't stop telling her how proud he was of her bravery. She kissed him softly, looked into his eyes, and whispered, "You go first." He hesitated. "I don't know." "Come on," she coaxed. "You're not scared, are you?" He grinned. "All right, I'll show you how it's done." He walked to the edge, looked down at the sea crashing against the rocks below, then back at Simone. She was watching him, intently. He blew her a kiss. Then he jumped. The crowd cheered. He splashed into the water and came up grinning. "Your turn, babe." She smiled down at him and waved. "Simone," he called, but she turned away. She walked to a different part of the cliff, higher, secluded. No tourists, no cameras, just sharp rocks and deep water. She stood there for a long time, staring at the waves. She could still back out. She could forgive. But forgiveness wasn't in her blood anymore. Dwayne climbed up the rocks to join her. "That was amazing. You okay?" She nodded. "Come here." He walked toward her, soaked and smiling. She took his hand. And in that moment, just as he leaned in to kiss her, she whispered, "You shouldn't have told me." Then she pushed. It happened fast. A stumble, a shout, a body hurtling through the air. Then silence. And then the splash. Simone fell to her knees, gasping, pretending to scream for help. People came running. Staff jumped in the water. But by the time they pulled Dwayne's body to shore, it was already too late. Broken neck, blunt force trauma, dead on impact. The paramedics said it was a tragic accident. The police took a statement. Simone cried into a towel, shaking, trembling, but her eyes were dry. The official cause of death was listed as accidental fall blunt force trauma to the head, neck, and upper spine. The local authorities closed their preliminary file within 24 hours. Another tourist death. Another careless dive from Negril's cliffs. Another paradise turned tragic. The staff at Rick's Cafe offered their condolences. Simone was escorted back to the resort by management and checked into a private suite to grieve. The hotel upgraded her room, sent flowers and food trays, and assigned a private guest liaison to support the young widow. Simone cried when people expected her to. She hugged the driver who brought her back. She even clutched Dwayne's soaking wet phone in her hand as if holding on to a final piece of him. But inside she was calm, because this was the plan. And it had worked. At the resort bar that evening, tourists whispered about the pretty young woman who had just lost her husband in a diving accident. Some said they'd seen her earlier that day, laughing and taking selfies with him. Others claimed she seemed distant, distracted, like someone bracing for something inevitable. Miguel, the same driver who had taken them to Rick's Cafe, sat in silence with his beer. He'd driven thousands of tourists to that cliffside. Some never jumped. A few got hurt. But none had died like that. Not that fast. Not that hard. He couldn't shake the look on her face as they drove back. Blank. Almost cold. Still, he said nothing. Death was common in paradise. But suspicion? That needed proof. Dwayne's body was kept in a local morgue overnight before being released to Jamaican authorities for an expedited autopsy. Simone requested a quick cremation, citing too much trauma to fly the body home. She wanted to leave the pain here and start fresh. But before she could act on that request, the Negril Parish Police Department received a visit from someone they weren't expecting. Keisha, Simone's cousin. Dressed in all black and wearing oversized sunglasses, Keisha looked every bit like a grieving family member. But her presence wasn't about closure. It was about suspicion. She had heard the news of Dwayne's death through a forwarded WhatsApp message the night before. The words cliff diving accident rang hollow in her ears. Keisha knew Dwayne. She knew Simone. And more importantly, she knew what had happened between her and Dwayne the night before the wedding. Her guilt didn't blind her to the signs. She walked into the police station the next morning and said one sentence. "I think Simone killed her husband." Keisha told the officers everything. About how she and Dwayne had slept together the night before the wedding. About how he was racked with guilt. About how she'd received a voice message from him a day before his death saying, "I finally told her the truth. I had to." The police didn't act immediately. They had no cause, no weapon, no proof. But something shifted that day. Detective Carlton Miles, a veteran officer in Negril with 18 years of service, reopened the case unofficially. He ordered a preliminary review of the autopsy and asked for statements from bystanders at Rick's Cafe. What he found next cracked the case open. A Canadian tourist named Rebecca Mallory came forward with a short, grainy video clip on her phone. She had been filming the sunset that evening, capturing the waves and the sounds of the crowd. But in the background, far off to the right, barely visible, two figures stood at the edge of the cliff. You couldn't hear them. You couldn't see Simone's face. But at timestamp 1:16 you could see a man fall. No jump, no run up, just a jerking motion, and then a body plunging downward like a rag doll. Rebecca hadn't realized what she'd captured until she got back home. When Detective Miles saw the footage, his gut turned. This wasn't an accident. This was a push. Meanwhile, Simone was preparing to leave Jamaica. Her bags were packed. The hotel staff hugged her goodbye. Management gave her a handwritten letter expressing sorrow and sympathy. Simone cried for the cameras. Journalists had started to gather around the story. Tragedy in paradise. Newlywed dies in cliff diving accident. She played the grieving widow well. Until she didn't. 2 hours before her flight to Kingston, she was stopped at Sangster International Airport by local police. Not arrested. Not yet. But detained for questioning. Simone stayed calm. She was smart enough to say only one thing. You think I pushed my own husband off a cliff? That's insane. But the police had already filed for a digital warrant. Because Dwayne's iPhone, the one Simone had kept since the incident, had just been unlocked by a forensics team. And inside, buried in the Notes app, was something chilling. If I don't come back, ask Keisha what I told Simone. Now the media frenzy turned. Reporters changed their tone. Was it really an accident? Newlyweds fall raises red flags. Wife's cousin claims a love triangle turned deadly. The court of public opinion was sharpening its pitchforks. But the real court in Montego Bay was preparing to open a murder investigation. And Simone Robinson's perfect lie was crumbling. Because in Jamaica, even paradise has shadows. And now everyone was asking the same question. Was it grief on her face? Or guilt? News spread fast. By the time Simone was taken in for questioning, whispers had turned to full-blown rumors across Jamaica and social media. Some still believed it was a tragic accident. Others weren't so sure. Detective Carlton Miles wasn't letting this go. The more he dug, the more things didn't sit right. The autopsy revealed defensive wounds on Dwayne's arms, bruises that didn't match a clean dive. His head trauma was consistent with a fall, but his body showed signs of a struggle. Simone told police, "We were happy. He jumped. I screamed. That's all." But her calm demeanor didn't match the story of a devastated wife. Meanwhile, Keisha added fuel to the fire. She told investigators about the affair, the confession, and Simone's rage. She handed over voice messages from Dwayne. One stood out. "If anything happens to me, don't believe it was an accident." That was the turning point. Police searched Simone's phone and recovered recently deleted searches. Fastest acting natural poisons. Death from cliff fall. How to delete phone data remotely. Detectives were no longer asking if Simone pushed him. They were asking why she thought she'd get away with it. Dwayne's phone was the final nail in the coffin. A forensics team recovered deleted notes, messages, and voice recordings. One message was chilling. "If I don't come back from this trip, Simone knows. Keisha was a mistake. I told her." That note, timestamped the night before his death, changed everything. Keisha confirmed the message was meant for her. She had ignored it at the time, thinking he was just being dramatic. Detectives now had motive, a witness, suspicious behavior, and digital proof. Simone's story no longer held. 2 days later, Simone was at the airport, dressed in black, passport in hand, ready to return to Kingston. Just before boarding, officers approached her calmly. "Simone Robinson, you're under arrest for the murder of your husband, Dwayne Robinson." She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She simply said, "You have no idea what he did to me." The trial began 6 months later in Montego Bay. The prosecution presented everything. The confession, the deleted searches, Keisha's testimony, and the video clip showing Dwayne falling without a jump. Simone's defense claimed she acted in the heat of passion, shocked by Dwayne's betrayal. But the jury didn't buy it. After just 4 hours of deliberation, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty of second-degree murder. Simone was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Simone gave one interview from behind bars. "He broke me. I broke him back. Maybe I just wanted him to feel what I felt. Even if only for a second." Keisha left Jamaica. Dwayne's mother refused to speak to the media. And the cliffs of Negril, once a place of thrill and beauty, became a silent witness to a deadly fall. One not of misstep, but of betrayal, rage, and a love that couldn't survive the truth.